Yay. So this is Truth-Telling Memoir as Resistance with Leah Pellegrini, Philadelphia-based essayist whose work focuses on chronic illness, queerness, and other ways the body reflects and resists the modern American fairy tale. Her essay, The Common Scold, was selected as a finalist for Fourth Genre's annual Steinberg Memorial Essay Prize in 2025, and her previous writing has been published in Compound Butter, Human Parts, Mindbodygreen, The Fold magazine, and more. She has received a fellowship from Vermont Studio Center and a residency at the Sundress Academy of the Arts. She's currently a candidate for an MFA in Creative Nonfiction at Rutgers University-Camden. And Leah, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Good. Cool. Um, like Mattia said, I'm Leah. I'm so happy to be here facilitating this workshop today. Um, as you can hear and guess from that bio, I am just a huge proponent of creative nonfiction writing, whether that's journaling or essays or full-length memoir, because I just think it has a really special capacity to do what this workshop is all about, which is resist. I have a PowerPoint for us and a variety of sort of slides and exercises we'll go through, but actually, before I say any more words, I want to kick us off in a little bit of a maybe a weird way, but an intentional way. I know most folks are off camera right now, which is totally fine if that is what you are comfortable with. If you are like, if you have access and feel okay getting on your camera for at least just like a couple minutes here while we do this, that would be amazing. No pressure. Um, but the first thing I'd love for us all to do is actually just like take a second and breathe together. Um, if you, again, if this is accessible to you, if you want to go ahead and sort of gently close your eyes, or you can just look down or look away at something peaceful. I guess you can keep your video off or turn it off again for a moment if that feels good. And just like let your body do its thing for a moment, which is to say, breathe, this thing that we all know how to do, even in times of apocalypse. If your eyes are closed, you might try actually becoming aware of what you can see when you can see nothing, which maybe is just pure black. Maybe there's like sparkles of light. You can think about that as a kind of magic void of potential. Take one more good deep breath. And then when you are ready, you can open your eyes. And actually, the reason I asked us all to get on camera for a second, if that is okay, is to actually look around the room at each other. Now that we have all grounded in our own individual bodies, just take a second. I have my Zoom in the gallery mode. Hopefully you do too. So you can just try to look at all these other people's faces, all these people who showed up to do this same weird, risky, scary, important thing together. And then, if you can pick up either a pencil or a pen, some kind of notebook or piece of paper, I'll give you a second to grab that if you don't have it. I'm going to set a timer for 45 seconds. And what we are going to do is make a list, as long a list as possible, in kind of like a rapid fire speed dump sort of a way, of things that piss you off. These can be like large scale collective political things. It can be itty bitty teeny tiny things. This is just for you. I will invite you to share some of it if you want, but you are not required to share it. Go wild, make the list as big as you want. Your timer starts now. Gonna give us 30 more seconds. All right, wrap up your thought. I will invite everybody, if you would like to go ahead and type one of the things from your list in the chat. You can choose like a safe, silly little thing again, or a larger thing. You're not obligated to do this, but if you'd like to share, and while you do that and look at each other's examples, I am going to pull up my PowerPoint. Oh, the cold is so real, in addition to these serious ones. Awesome. So good. Okay, you can go ahead and keep typing, and I'm going to get us started here. So, before we do anything else, it probably makes sense just to spend a second here grounding ourselves in a collective definition of resistance. This is obviously, for all sorts of reasons, a hot topic of conversation right now. So just to make sure we're all thinking about what this means in a shared way, not that this is like the one right way to think about it, but this is how I think about it. I just pulled up a dictionary definition. So, resistance is the attempt to prevent something by action or argument, the refusal to accept or comply with something, the ability to not be affected by something, especially adversely. There are a million bajillion things that we might all be resisting right now, a million bajillion things that need resisting, that need refusing and preventing and withstanding in this moment. Maybe some of us are thinking about white supremacy, transphobia, ableism, climate catastrophe, fascism. The list goes on and on and on. But no matter what sort of larger power structure we're thinking about resisting, the idea here is that it's a fundamentally oppositional stance, a defensive one that is pushing back against power. I say that because I think it's helpful to think about that as the posture that we are kind of bringing to the page when we do our memoir writing in service of resistance. Again, many reasons that resistance is a hot topic in this particular 2026 moment. I'm not going to spend too much time trying to convince you that resistance matters, or that writing matters as a tool. What I want to do instead is actually try to focus specifically on the how. Like, how do we actually write towards resistance in a craft way? How do we embed resistance specifically in our personal memoir-oriented work? So, for the purposes of this quick class, I have thought through four common themes, four things that at least I believe power kind of trains us to do or not to do, four sort of ideologies that we might be resisting in different ways, so that we can think about four ways to resist those things on the page. So, four tips total. Um, I have some thoughts on each one, a little bit of a segment of a reading, and then an exercise. We'll do a progressive series of prompts as we move through this hour together today. Here is tip number one. Reroute identity back in the body. Bring the body back onto the page. This is the reason that I actually kicked us off with just like doing some breathing together in our actual bodies in the world rather than jumping straight into our minds, because I think we are all trained with this tendency to try to divorce our creativity from our physicality. And I want us to try to resist that tendency to just intellectualize who we are, to anchor our identities in our ideologies alone, instead of to get into our bodies and all of their mess and their chaos and their strangeness. I think when we are writing memoir in service of resistance, it's important that we integrate our bodies in conversations about our identities. And I say identity because usually in writing memoir or any kind of sort of personal work, that's what we're talking about is like, who am I? What happened to me? What do I want? What do I think and believe? Um, if we do that in a purely sort of intellectual way, that's where we hit that stumbling block, I think, oftentimes around considering memoir as political. There's this question sometimes that can come up, at least for me, of like, who cares, like who I am and what happened to me? I'm just one little person. Don't we have bigger fish to fry? And I think the body gives us a lot of tools and a lot of material to navigate those sorts of questions in a more complex way. So, as we examine our bodies, we get to see both what makes us specific and unique and strange and individual, but also what makes us animal, which is to say, what makes us part of a family of a whole lot of other human beings who are just trying to survive on the planet too. Our bodies contain our ancestral and personal histories. They contain our sensitivities, our habits, our reactions and instincts, our preferences, our inconsistencies, our inconvenient emotions, all of this stuff. Again, whether we're talking about resisting white supremacy or capitalism or any other ism, all of those isms function by disconnecting us from these parts of our bodies because of all of this info that is threatening to power. So I've pulled up an example here of a piece of writing that I think does a beautiful job really bringing the body onto the page. This is an excerpt from The Hollow Half, which is this gorgeous memoir by a writer named Sarah Aziza. This book weaves stories of Sarah's personal experiences with anorexia into stories of her parents and grandparents who are refugees from Gaza. So it's a lot about her Palestinian American experience, but specifically through the lens of this very intense body thing that she has had to grapple with individually. In doing that, it explores a lot of her own traumas as reflections of larger collective traumas. This is a long one, so I will read this one for you. This is from near the beginning of the book. I was supposed to be a son. My father called me Tariq until my birth. Confronted with biology, they chose my name in the delivery room. Sarah, a woman of questionable humor, but amenable to any tongue or creed. A name chosen for what it could span, covering the gaps they could not close. Later, they'd embellish. Sarah, like a princess, perfect for a fairy tale. I could not hear what they did not say, that I arrived after 6 years of marriage, each one edging on divorce, that they needed me like they needed Amrika, America, a new pure shape for their belief, one with the power to absolve. On weekends, my father raked leaves or rolled snowballs with us in the yard. In battered work boots, wide strides over the land, he was making his, one mortgage payment at a time. He piled overtime hours into evenings, double long john winters pouring concrete, laying pipe. He clutched his exhaustion like a talisman, smiled in his sleep. He did not speak of his stillborn lives, all those murdered tries. Perhaps it was real forgetfulness. Perhaps silence was a choice made fresh each day. Yet the unspoken pressed against us, filled our hallways with its breath. It flickered on his dark skin. In the twin bites left by the smallpox vaccine, they still gave third world babies in his day. His crooked, cavitied tooth. The way he refused to waste food, serving himself expired yogurt and dried out bread. I'm used to it, his answer to my mother's wrinkled nose as he scraped his plate, sucked marrow from chicken bones. But for his own babies, nothing but fresh food. My delicate American belly fed casserole, ketchup, toast. What do you notice about the role that the body is playing in this particular segment? I'll invite anyone who might want to speak to just to unmute and share here. Or if that is too complicated question, like where do you see the body in this segment of work?
I'll share, Lee, if you
Thank you.
want.
Go for it.
So, Sarah starts right off with saying she's confronted with biology. So we're placed in a delivery room, which is a very embodied experience if you've given birth. And then because we're in the body, we get this new name of a person. And then the description of the father is full of what his body does to keep them alive. And then she does very well in describing him and his character that supports that, from his s- smallpox vaccine scar to his crooked cavity teeth, and then showing why his body wants to eat all of that food that's placed out in front of him, even if it's disgusting, because of his background.
Thank you. Amazing. Um, yeah, there's so much body in here in all of these different ways. A lot of my notes are things that you just brought up, Stephanie. I particularly love this little segment here where you really get like the father's body reflecting the tangible physical labor of assimilating to America. Like it's to try to become American, whatever that means, is not just an intellectual project, like it is a physicalized one. And this description renders that more tangible. Can also imagine, again, this is a memoir that is a lot about anorexia and the complexities of that. You can see where this last line, my delicate American belly-fed casserole, ketchup, toast, where that is sort of planting some essential seeds about what it means to come from this particular sort of context and to deal with the refusal of food. All of that in mind, we're going to do a quick exercise now. So first thing, number one, you can use the same sheet of paper, just draw a line and right below it. Make a quick list of your own embodied identities, visible and invisible. So you can go broad here, things like white, woman, these are things that I might write down. Um, and or also you can get super specific. Um, Dancer, big sister, these things count as identities too. So just make a big list of all of the different ways that you might identify. I'll give you like a minute to do that. Here's step number two. Circle one of those identities and go ahead and make a second list. What were or are the rules in the metaphorical rule book for that identity? What does it mean to be a good, insert identity here? What does it mean to be a good woman, a good big sister, a good whatever identity you choose? Not according to you, but according to culture. Okay, and here is step three, and I'm going to give you a proper few minutes here. So I'm setting a timer for 3 minutes. Choose one rule, or if you want, you can break the rules, choose a few rules, and write about how your body refuses to comply with whatever that rule is. So you can do some loose free writing, you can think of a specific experience that comes to mind. But again, the goal here is to think about how that refusal happened through your body. So you can think about sensory reactions. You can think about tensions and twists in your muscles, temperatures, skin reactions, like literally feelings in your organs. Think literally, but also metaphorically here. Again, you've got about 3 minutes to do this one. One more minute left. Right. There's our timer. Hold on to that, wrap up your thought. You can come back to it. And we're going to move on to tip number 2. So now that we have grounded in our bodies and we've done a little body thinking and feeling, tip number 2 is to not just root inward, but also at the same time, orient outward. What I mean here actually relates to that last example from that excerpt from Sarah Aziza. There's an awareness in her story that her story is not only her story, right? That it reflects legacies of oppression that are much wider than her own story and that require attention and care. When we are writing memoir again, or any kind of personal writing, our stories may, or really in memoir must, be grounded in personal experiences, but we can complicate them and render them more meaningful when we connect them to larger contexts. By revealing what you know via what you personally, specifically have gone through, how can you orient towards care for a much larger community? And who else might you make space for on the page? This tip is the reason that after we did some breathing, I asked you all to just like look around the room at everybody else that is in here on this Zoom call, even though it is virtual, to remember that writing doesn't have to be just an individual and independent act that we do in a silo, that actually we do it amongst other people who have both shared and completely different experiences from our own. So there are plenty of different ways to think about this move from the individual angle on memoir to the collective one. One way is to think about literally doing interviews of other people whose stories somehow intersect with your own and folding those interviews in. One is to introduce data, like literally to look up statistics for things that have to do with the stories that you're telling, to just like name the larger power structures at play in a moment that happened to you that you think is a story worth telling. Those are just a few ways. I think there are many, and I'm going to share again another example that I think brings this concept to life. So this one is from Sex with a Brain Injury. I don't know if anyone else, I don't know how many people in this Zoom are actually from Philly, but this is by Annie Leontis, who is a transgender queer author who is based in Philadelphia. And it is a memoir about their multiple concussions and about the ways that those concussions have impacted their own life and relationships. But it also interrogates brain injuries as a silent epidemic with a very under-discussed role in the criminal justice system, in the queer community, and more. This was the kind of book that like blew my mind. And taught me to notice issues through Annie's own specific experience that like I wouldn't have known were there if they hadn't done the work of writing them down in this way. So here is one segment. Again, this is memoir, but you'll see that this is written in second person. So the you here is the narrator. Um, is anyone interested in reading this one out loud, or shall I read again? Okay, I'll read.
I can read.
Oh, go for it. Thank you.
For the first 11 months, you are a mess. The next 6 months, a different kind of mess. Sometimes you faint or nearly faint. Usually, you cry. You used to feel superior to people who cried in public, but mostly your response is fight. At the grocery store, in traffic, at a parent-teacher conference, at a barbecue, at a brunch. You never understood angry people, but now you are one of them. Maybe you are among the 10% of the 3.8 million athletes or motorists concussed each year. Maybe you are one of 415,000 wounded vets. Maybe a woman in combat, recovering in silence. A person who is incarcerated and therefore 7 times more likely to get a head injury than those who retain their freedom. A college kid after a night of drinking. Maybe you are one out of every 2 people experiencing houselessness who also has a brain injury, likely injured before you lost your home. You are probably not Abraham Lincoln or Harriet Tubman, but now you know a shadow of their suffering after concussion. And maybe when you envisioned your life and all the things you'd ever do, you couldn't imagine the will that you would have to summon just to get through a day.
Thank you so much. So you can see, obviously, this is like a very short segment. You can see how much research this writer has put in to this work. Research on things that, again, like at least I, as a reader, had no idea that a concussion was part of Abraham Lincoln and Harriet Tubman's stories. Um, by doing the research here, this allows this writer to provide a voice for other people who, yes, have similar experiences to the writer themselves, but also who come from totally different contexts. This book, even just in this one segment, becomes a way of using memoir, using personal story to tell other stories that really need to be told and to make a larger political point. And also, again, just a cool little craft trick. The idea of writing in second person can be a cool way to kind of telegraph a universality to something, right? Like, this is not actually my story. Um, all of us, even those of us who haven't experienced concussions ourselves, certainly know people who have. And so there's something about the address of the you um, that reminds us that this is not actually a unique, particular, solitary experience, but one that lots of folks have been through. So, on to our next exercise. If we had more time today, if this was more than an hour, I would actually send you off to do some research, like to go look up some data on the identities that you made on that list or the one that you just wrote about, so you can see what some of the larger issues are that other people with those shared identities are facing. Instead, because we only have so much time, we're going to do kind of a rapid fire version of what I think Annie is ultimately trying to do in that piece of writing. So go back to your list of identities that you made a moment ago and pick a second one. So not the one you wrote about already, but a different one. And spend a few minutes, I'll set like a 3-minute timer again, reflecting on any or all of the following questions. How do these two identities, so the new one you're picking and the one you wrote about before, how do they complicate each other? How does one of them provide some extra privilege or supportive resources for grappling with the other? And or how does one render the other more challenging? I'll let you know when we have 1 minute left. One more minute here. All right, go ahead and wrap up your thought. Here's tip number 3. Tip number 3. So we have grounded in our bodies. We have extended outward. Tip number 3 is to name the uncomfortable feelings, to embrace the very inconvenient emotions, the countercultural ones, the icky ones, the sticky ones, the ones that surprise you. It is really easy to take this as some kind of like therapeutic advice, but I actually don't mean that in that way, although that's great too. In this case, I'm actually talking about naming these weird, uncomfortable feelings on the page as a craft tool when writing political, rebellious writing. The thing about uncomfortable or inconvenient feelings is that they point directly to the places that we are bumping up against the rules of the world. So, the places that we have transgressed, the places that we have been transgressed. Power would prefer that we numb and censor those feelings, right? So that we don't actually notice what's happening and we don't act on it. So when we express those feelings on the page, we are, in a way, refusing to be numbed. We are also empowering other people to feel this stuff too. Naming these weird, vulnerable, honest emotions is also a way of building trust in our own instincts, also trust with our readers, trust in our bodies that do the feeling of the feelings, trust in each other as a collective to feel the sorts of things that we need to feel in order to protect each other, as opposed to calming down and swallowing the stuff that kind of gets in the way of the normal progression of the world. So I've made a whole list of these sorts of feelings here: guilt, rage, loneliness, fear, rejection. The list goes on. For this one, I have not pulled an example from a more current book. I have pulled it from the iconic Bell Hooks. This is from an essay that is called Killing Rage, Militant Resistance. Does anyone want to read this one? I can't quite hear you. I hear like a little mumble of sound.
How about now?
There we go.
Okay,
Great.
here we go. I am writing this essay sitting beside an anonymous white male that I long to murder. We have just been involved in an incident on an airplane where Kay, my friend and traveling companion, has been called to the front of the plane and publicly attacked by white female stewardesses who accused her of trying to occupy a seat in first class that is not assigned to her. Although she had been assigned a seat, she was not given the appropriate boarding pass. When she tries to explain, they ignore her. They keep explaining to her in loud voices as though she is a child, as though she is a foreigner who does not speak airline English, that she must take another seat. They do not want to know that the airline has made a mistake. They only want to ensure that the white male who has the appropriate boarding card will have a seat in first class. Realizing our powerlessness to alter the moment, we take our seats. Kay moves to coach, and I take my seat next to the anonymous white man who quickly apologizes to Kay as she moves her bag from the seat he has comfortably settled in. I stare him down with rage, tell him that I do not want to hear his liberal apologies, his repeated insistence that it was not his fault. I am shouting at him that it is not a question of blame, that the mistake was understandable, but the way Kay was treated was completely unacceptable, that it was reflected both that it reflected both racism and sexism.
Thank you so much for reading. What do you all think of this one? It's very bell hooks. I love this one as an example of really not holding back. This refuses from the very beginning to hold back, precisely because that is what the racism and the sexism would want bell hooks to do, right? This is directly says names murder, like an anonymous white male that I long to murder. It directly names the rage in the writing itself, in the feelings of the feelings on the page while telling this story. Again, bell hooks is like directly resisting the exact forces that the piece is meant to be about in the first place. And this does not function without the feeling of rage being present in as overt and clear and sharp a way as it is. With that one in mind, we're going to move on to exercise number 3. So from the very start of class, you have a list of things that make you, I wrote furious here. I think the way I phrased it before was pissed. You've also now done some writing on who you are as an individual, as a member of broader communities. So now for this next little exercise, consider an intersection between your own identity or the multiple identities you've written about and one of the objects or one of the things you feel rageful about. Take a moment to write about it a la bell hooks. So you can either think of a specific example where this has come up for you, or you can just do some more general sort of reflection. Again, 3-minute timer here. This one I imagine you might not finish in the 3 minutes, but at least you'll get something started. 1 more minute. All right, wrap up your thought for now, and we will move on to the final of our 4 principles here. Here's number 4. Challenge pre-existing stories, both your own and the world's. In many ways, this one is what all 3 of those prior tips have been pointing towards. So by getting into our bodies and into our messiest feelings, by connecting our intimate experiences to collective contexts, hopefully what we are doing with all of that is we are orienting towards truths that otherwise do not tend to get named or seen. The reason, or at least one reason, that I think memoir is so particularly useful as a tool of resistance is because it is a way of examining ourselves and our communities way, way, way up close, asking questions not just about what happened, but why it happened, and how it happened, and when it has happened before, and what it would take for it to happen differently. As we do this, we get to examine and challenge and question and reframe and analyze not just ourselves, but the world that we live in. And in doing so, we move away from compliance with common cultural narratives and towards actual, authentic truth. By deliberately recording our own stories in a way that is a whole lot slower than the pace of just everyday easy speech, we have the opportunity to catch ourselves regurgitating stuff that we do not actually believe, stories that we have internalized from elsewhere, so that we can question our own assumptions just as we challenge the rules of the world. So here is our final little reading example. This one is from another one of my favorite memoirs, which is called Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Are people familiar with this one at all? Maybe no. This one does a brilliant job questioning the truth and really like embodying all 4 of the tips that we've talked about. Chanel Miller was publicly known as Emily Doe in the sexual assault case against Brock Turner a number of years ago. It was a big public case. She published a victim impact statement that went viral, and then this truly stunning, stunning memoir that questions a lot of normative ideas about the criminal justice system and how we grapple with sexual assault. So this excerpt is from the point in the book when Brock Turner gets unanimously voted guilty. Does anyone want to read this final one?
I would read it.
Thank you.
It is a pure and constant rhythm beating into me, a recitation of the truth. The guesses go unbroken, like steps taking us somewhere. As my eyes follow them one by one, I feel anger draining out of me, making space for something else. I thought I would look at the defense attorney's pitiful face, see Brock's head hung low, and call for confetti, feeling triumphant. But I do not think to do or feel any of that. As I watch the jury members, all other sounds fall away. It was like looking back at a sandy shore from the water and realizing how far I had drifted. How far had I let myself go? Who was this person sitting here, so hungry to be told the answer was yes? I thought of Emily that morning, standing in the shower, struggling to stand up straight, surrounded by steam. How badly I wanted to abandon her, how little I thought of her life. I sit in sadness, inhaling wet air, my eyes closed, my chest shaking. I tune out of the courtroom, the agony too big, my head lowered in apology. I'm so sorry. You were not crazy. For so long, I believed I needed permission to return to my life, waiting for validation. I promised myself I would never question whether I deserved better.
Thank you. So I selected this one really because it does all of the things that we have talked about so far. It puts the body directly on the page. We see Brock's head held low. We see the inhaling of wet air. It grapples with unexpected emotion. I guess the sadness and the chest shaking, those things are not surprising. Um, but this piece here about like, I thought I would feel triumphant, but that's not how I feel at all. The complexities of the feelings here. It's a little subtle, but it does connect to these larger communal stories too. So here, this Emily again is Emily Doe, that false name that she had to take on over the context of this trial. In naming herself this way, referring to herself this way, she's connecting to a whole lot of other Emily Does in the world and in this country. And in all of this, she's challenging just truths and expectations about like what it actually means to be victorious in this sort of case. Um, what she and other women in her position deserve. And in all of this, builds a new sort of a story and a much larger political message that is deeply resonant and important coming from her super unique and personal experience. Maybe not unique in the fact that it happened, but the sort of publicity of this trial and the specificity of what she went through is so intimately detailed in here in a way that is nearly impossible not to connect to. So here's our final exercise, which we will do maybe super quickly, and then this is something that you can take home, or you are home. Keep going with at home, I guess. So if you take a look at everything you've written so far, all the things on your paper, you can mark it up now, edit it, refine it with these questions as guides. What are the truths you do not want to see and or tell? As you wrote about some feelings before, is that really how you felt? How do you know? What's an alternative story here? What do you know now that you didn't know then? What did you know then that you have now forgotten? These are a few prompts you can play with, but I'll give you, I think, just like 2 minutes to basically just, if you want to write these questions down, just look over what you've written, do a little bit of thinking, and then we will wrap up together. If you want one more step that you can take and do later, here is the final exercise that I would leave you with. Take whatever notes you're making in the margins or have made into the margins, fold them directly into an essay based on any of the exercises we did today, or maybe even better, try writing an entire essay founded on your margin notes themselves, which is to say, write about the things that you censored, that you tempered, that you tamped down before, and this time, yell them, sob them, rage on the page. I'll leave this up for 1 second for anyone who wants to capture what's here. And then I see a request in the chat to go back a couple slides, so I will do that in a moment. I'm not sure, is this the one that people were asking for? You can unmute and let me know. This was the beginning of tip number 4. This
It
part?
was tip number 4.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. We have exactly 5 minutes left. So again, there's a world in which I'd give us more time to write here, but since you can do that at home, I think I'll just give us a second. Did anything come up through any of these exercises that was helpful? Is there any writing that anyone did that you want to share, either out loud or in the chat? You are welcome to unmute yourself. I'm curious how all of this went.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I guess this is based more on like personal essays that I've been experimenting with for the first time this year. And I was wondering how you kind of tackle the feeling of, as you get into personal writing, maybe starting to feel like selfish or like that voice in your head that's like, this sounds like it's all about you. Like it feels very self-centered. Yeah, so I was just wondering if you have any advice for when your mind kind of starts to get on with those narratives. And aside from that, thank you so much. I found all of the tips so helpful. Thank you.
Good, I'm so glad. Yeah, I think that is a super common and super relatable feeling. And frankly, these 4 tips are my answer. I think at least what I find is that feeling or that like fear of maybe I am being selfish actually stops us from going as deep as we might actually need to go to get to the deeper, larger truth. So there's a way that I think sometimes we can keep ourselves a little more on the surface, like stay in our heads and abandon the bodies, or not name the super personal, uncomfortable feeling as if when we do that, it will be too selfish. But I think actually the going in deeper and the like getting to that real, vulnerable, strange, uncomfortable stuff is the space that we wind up actually reaching out hands to other people who need to hear our stories. I also would argue that perhaps sometimes it is a radical thing to be selfish. Maybe sometimes it is actually okay to be telling personal stories that are selfish. Maybe we get to claim that space. Any other thoughts or questions before I pass it back to Mattia? Cool. Thank you so much for being here. This was recorded, so I think it's going to be on the Blue Stoop YouTube thing. So if there are like slides that you missed, you should be able to go back and find those. I'm also happy to share stuff with you over email. My email is here. My website is here. That @ handle there is just an Instagram handle. I would love to hear from anyone who wants to reach out after. I'm always here to chat about this stuff, and I really appreciate you being here. And it was such a joy for me, even just to like watch everybody doing all that writing. So thank you so much. Mattia, did you want to close us out? I will stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leah. Thanks everyone for being here. And I'm going to share a few links from Blue Stoop. As you know, this is a free session, but there is also a donation link, also, I believe, behind me. If you want to donate to Blue Stoop, they're a really cool org, which is why I'm here volunteering. And then there's also a feedback survey. That's the first link here. And the feedback survey helps Blue Stoop apply for grants. So it's actually really important beyond just the general, it's great to see feedback. They do read all those feedback forms. And there's the events page, and then there's a weekly newsletter if you want to hear what's coming up. We'll be here again next Thursday, and we'd love to see you then. And thanks for being here.